Tumtum and Nutmeg, A Seaside Surprise, Chapter 3. The Nutmouses were astonished. They had seen the general yesterday and told him about their trip, but he hadn't mentioned anything about coming too. "How did you get here?" Tumtum asked. "In the same backpack as you," the general replied shiftily. "I was hiding in one of Lucy's shoes. I crept on board last night. I've never been to the seaside, so when I heard you were going, well, I decided to come too." "Oh dear, does Mrs. Marchmouse know you're here?" Nutmeg asked. Poor Mrs. Marchmouse. The general was always running away from home, and it made her terribly nervous. "She'll know by now," the general said, looking a little guilty. "I left her a note on the breakfast table." Tumtum and Nutmeg sighed. They should have known better than to tell the general about their trip, for he would never resist an adventure. And whenever he turned up, trouble seemed to follow, which is why the Nutmouses were not altogether pleased to see him. But Lord Seamouse did not know how troublesome the general could be. He was delighted to have another visitor. "I'll go make some more tea," he said, "and I believe I've got some germ tots left, unless that nuisance of a cockroach has eaten them all." Lord Seamouse hurried off to the kitchen, but as he reappeared, there was a huge crash that made the whole mousehole tremor. The paintings shook on the walls, and the teacups rattled in their saucers. "Help!" Lord Seamouse cried, ducking behind the tray. "There's no need to worry. It's only the children coming back," Nutmeg said calmly. The children crashed and banged all the time in Rose Cottage, so she and Tumtum were quite used to it by now. But Lord Seamouse looked horrified. There hadn't been any children at Smuggler's Keep in his lifetime, so he didn't know how noisy they could be. "They won't give you any trouble," Nutmeg reassured him. "And if the weather's fine today, they'll spend most of their time outdoors." Lord Seamouse sat down in his seashell, feeling rather shaken. "What do human children do?" he asked curiously. "Oh, lots of things," Tumtum replied. "They play soccer and hide and seek, and they bake cakes, and they make model airplanes. They read books." "They can read?" Lord Seamouse asked in astonishment. "Oh, yes," Nutmeg replied, "and they can write too." Lord Seamouse stroked his whiskers. He looked deep in thought. "Do you think they could read a map?" he asked eventually. "Of course," Tumtum said. "They are a highly intelligent breed." "Then they might be just what I need," Lord Seamouse said excitedly. "How do you mean?" Nutmeg asked. Lord Seamouse got up and walked over to his desk. He opened the drawer and took out a brown envelope labeled "Top Secret." Then he pulled a piece of crumpled paper from it and passed it around so everyone could see. "Why, it's a map!" the general exclaimed. He always loved a good map to read, and this one looked very intriguing. It showed a beach covered in sandcastles, with a line of big craggy rocks down one side. The biggest rock had its name written beside it, Stargazer, and it was marked with a black cross. "What does this all mean?" he asked excitedly. "It's a treasure map," Lord Seamouse said in a hushed tone. He leaned over and traced it with his paw. "The beach is just right here in front of the cottage, and the cross marks where the treasure is hidden. In a cave inside Stargazer." "What treasure?" the general asked. "Why, my treasure, of course," Lord Seamouse replied. "The lost treasures of Seaview Manor." "Seaview Manor?" everyone asked, looking very confused. "Yes, Seaview Manor," Lord Seamouse said impatiently. "You must have noticed it when you were traveling across the bedroom floor. It's the finest manor house in all of Mousewall." "Oh, you mean the dollhouse?" Nutmeg said. "Yes, we did admire it, but it looked abandoned. Does no one live there?" Lord Seamouse sighed. He could see that he would have to explain everything from the beginning. "The last person to live in Seaview Manor was me," he said, "and oh, you should have seen the house then. I lived just as a lord should. There were tapestries and chandeliers and four-poster beds and a piano and a ping-pong table. Oh, and the drawing-room chairs were upholstered in chintz. Every room was appointed to the highest standard, and if you could only have seen the dinners I hosted in the dining room. Do you know, my dears, the table could seat 12. Lord Seamouse wiped a tear from his eye. Thinking about his old home always made him sad. "Whose dollhouse was it?" the general asked. It had belonged to Uncle Jeremy when he was a little boy, Lord Seamouse said. He used to keep it downstairs in the drawing room. But it got in the way, so one day he dumped it up here. And that's when I moved in. Did Uncle Jeremy never see you? Nutmeg asked. Oh, no, Lord Seamouse replied. Uncle Jeremy seldom comes up here, and besides, he's much too old to be playing with dollhouses now. So what happened to all the furniture? Tumtum wondered. It was clear Lord Seamouse hadn't brought any of it into Seaview Hollow. Everything here was very shabby. It was stolen. Every last stick, Lord Seamouse said. I went out for a stroll one day, and when I came home, Seaview Manor had been stripped bare. They took everything. The wardrobes, the beds, the soup bowls. They even took my stuffed beetles. Who? Everyone cried. Beach mice, Lord Seamouse said distastefully. Bad apples who sleep in rough sand castles. Mouse walls full of them. Anyway, word had gone out that I had a lot of fancy things, and one day a gang of them came up here and stole everything. My cleaning mouse, old Miss Moptail, was polishing the silver when they arrived, and they tied her up. When I got home, she was the only thing left. Everyone looked very shocked. What a terrible story, Nutmeg said. It certainly was, Lord Seamouse replied. Mrs. Moptail was in a dreadful state, and I couldn't even make her a cup of tea because those rotters had taken my kettle. Well, I couldn't stay in Seaview Manor without any furniture. It felt much too bleak, so I moved in here to Seaview Hollow, and of course it's perfectly cozy and all that. But, well, it's not quite the same. The others nodded in sympathy. They could see why the Hollow must seem like quite a letdown after life at the manor. Was Uncle Jeremy upset when everything disappeared? Nutmeg asked. Oh, he never bothers with the dollhouse. He hasn't even noticed that the furniture's gone, Lord Seamouse replied. But of course the thieves took his teeth too. His teeth? Everyone cried. Yes, his teeth, Lord Seamouse said. All his milk teeth, you know, the ones that fell out when he was a boy. I found them in Seaview Manor soon after I moved in. They were hiding under a bed. Was there a full set? Tumtum asked. Oh yes, a full set, Lord Seamouse replied proudly. Everyone gasped, for human teeth are very valuable things. If a wicked mouse creeps up into the night and plucks one out from under a child's pillow, he can trade it with the tooth fairies for a gold coin. So just think how much the whole set would be worth. How did they end up under the bed? Tumtum asked. One of the tooth fairies must have hidden them there when Uncle Jeremy was a little boy, Lord Seamouse replied. Each time she collected another tooth from Uncle Jeremy's pillow, she would have added it to the pile until eventually there was a full set. They were very dusty when I found them. You could tell no one had touched them for years. But why would the tooth fairy have left them there so long? Nutmeg asked. Oh, you know what fairies are like, Lord Seamouse said snootily. Very silly creatures, always forgetting things. The poor fairy probably didn't remember where she'd hidden them. What did you do with them? Nutmeg asked. I polished them up and displayed them in my drawing-room cabinet, Lord Seamouse replied. All my visitors admired them, and they became quite a talking point. That was my mistake, of course, because soon every mouse in the village seemed to know there was a full set of milk teeth in Seaview Manor. So I suppose it's hardly surprising I was robbed. Couldn't you catch those thieves? Tumtum asked. We tried, Lord Seamouse said. Every police mouse in Mousewall was on the case of the missing teeth, and our local Mouse Gazette ran in a big story on it. There was even a reward for the rascals' heads. But they were very clever. They didn't leave a single clue. So what about this map? The General asked impatiently. That's the exciting part, Lord Seamouse said. The other day the post mouse arrived with a letter. And to my surprise, it was from one of the thieves himself, a fellow called Blackjaw. And very strange it was, too. He said he was the only one left of his gang. The rest of them came to a sticky end, or so he told me. Apparently they were stealing candy from the village shop, and they got trapped in a tub of sherbet. Oh, how terrible, Nutmeg said. What happened to Blackjaw? Tumtum asked. He got away, Lord Seamouse said, and without the others to egg him on, he began to mend his ways. He stopped thieving and started cleaning mouse holes for a living. But he didn't get much work because of all the mice around these parts knew him as a crook, so he decided to move up further the coast and start his life all over again. He felt so bad about robbing Seaview Manor that before he went, he sent me this map, showing me where the gang had hidden everything they stole. And he said that the teeth were still there too. How thrilling! The general cried. Then we must go back at once and get everything. Oh, that would be out of the question, Lord Seamouse said. Stargazer is the tallest rock on the whole beach, as tall as 2 grown men. If you stand in front of it, you can see it full of caves. The treasure is hidden in one of them, but the rock face is too steep to climb. Then how did Blackjaw's gang get there? Tumtum asked. They went up a secret tunnel inside the rock, Lord Seamouse replied, but the tunnel begins in the grotto. And to reach the grotto, you have to cross the rock pool. And if you try to cross the rock pool, you'll be gobbled alive by a crabby crab. Well, Blackjaw's gang had a big boat, so they could get right past him all right. But I've only got a raft, so I'd never survive. Nutmeg turned pale. She didn't like the sound of the crabby crab one bit, but the general was fearless. Who cares about your silly crab? I shall find the cave, he cried. Lord Seamouse laughed. I wouldn't try it, old boy. You'll come to a sticky end. The general scowled. He didn't like being laughed at. Well, if you don't let me try, then you'll never get your treasure back, he said grumpily. Oh, but I will, now that these 2 human children have appeared, Lord Seamouse beamed. Don't you see? They can climb up the rock and dig the treasure out. It would be no trouble for those giants. They could carry the entire contents of Seaview Manor home in a pillowcase. Lord Seamouse's face shone. At long last he might see all his lovely things again. Nutmeg looked anxious. Are you sure they wouldn't come to harm? Of course I am, Lord Seamouse replied. The rock wouldn't seem very big to them, and the crabby crab won't give them any trouble. It will flee to the bottom of the pool when it sees 2 humans coming. I think it's a capital plan, Tumtum said. Just think how thrilled they'll be. Nutmeg agreed. The children would love a treasure hunt. I'll leave the map on Lucy's bedside table tonight, and I'll write them a letter explaining exactly what to do, she said. Lord Seamouse hurried to his desk and found her a piece of paper. Everyone was very excited, but General Marchmouse had suddenly become quiet. Crabby crabs, caves, secret tunnels. Why, this was just the sort of adventure he craved. And he didn't see why Arthur and Lucy should have all the fun. He shot a sideways glance at the map, which the Lord Seamouse had left on his chair. Forget it, children, the general thought slyly. I'll find the cave first, and I'll bring back the teeth. And oh, just think what a hero I'll be. And that is the end of Chapter 4.